I'm Adriana, 32, an interior designer in Boston with what I thought was a perfect life and a soulmate in James, my husband of 5 years. Today at my brother Nathan's wedding, everything should have been magical. Instead, I discovered something that shattered my world. I caught James with Cassandra, my brand new sister-in-law, in a moment that left no doubt they were having an affair. But it was my father's reaction that truly stunned me. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family betray you in ways you never saw coming. Growing up, Nathan was more than just my brother. He was my protector, my confidant, and sometimes my partner in crime. Being only 2 years apart meant we shared everything from toys to secrets. I remember when I was 8 and he was 10, we built a treehouse in our backyard. Well, it was more like a few boards nailed haphazardly to the old oak tree, but in our minds, it was a castle. Nathan always made sure I had the safest spot to sit, checking the boards twice before letting me climb up. When our mother was diagnosed with breast cancer during my senior year of high school, Nathan was the one who held my hand through those terrifying hospital visits. He would drive home from college every weekend just to be there for Sunday family dinners, making sure Mom still had those moments of normalcy. After she passed 10 years ago now, our bond only grew stronger. We helped our father Robert navigate his grief while dealing with our own. I met James at a charity gala for cancer research 7 years ago. I was there representing the interior design firm where I worked, as we had donated a free home makeover for the auction. James was a financial advisor who had helped organize the event. He was charming, attentive, and when he looked at me across the room, it felt like we were the only two people there. That night we talked until the venue staff started stacking chairs around us. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, we were living together in my downtown apartment. By our second anniversary, we were exchanging vows in a small ceremony at my father's lakeside home. My father, always the pragmatic judge, had raised an eyebrow at how quickly things progressed, but gave his blessing when he saw how happy James made me. Dad had always been our rock. After 25 years as a family court judge, he developed an almost supernatural ability to read people. Mom used to joke that she could never surprise him because he'd figure it out from the smallest change in her behavior. After losing Mom, he threw himself into his work, becoming one of the most respected judges in Massachusetts. He was tough, but fair both on the bench and at home. Nathan followed in Dad's footsteps, becoming a lawyer at one of Boston's top firms. That's where he met Cassandra 2 years ago. She was a new associate transferred from their New York office. When Nathan first brought her to Sunday dinner at Dad's house, I was struck by how beautiful she was. Tall, with long dark hair and a smile that lit up the room. She was charming, laughing at all of Dad's corny jokes and asking thoughtful questions about his cases. But something about her made me uneasy. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a calculation behind her eyes when she thought no one was looking. Once I walked into the kitchen and caught her scrolling through Nathan's phone while he was in the bathroom. When she saw me, she quickly put it down, claiming she was just checking the time. Another time during a family barbecue, I overheard her on the phone, her voice completely different, sharp and cold, talking about securing her position. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call and transformed back into sweet Cassandra. I tried to share my concerns with Nathan, but he was completely smitten. "You're just being overprotective, Audrey," he'd say. "Cassandra's amazing. You'll see." So I backed off, telling myself that maybe I was just being paranoid or jealous that my brother had found someone while my own marriage was hitting some rough patches. When they announced their engagement after only a year of dating, I put on a happy face. Nathan deserved happiness, and who was I to question his choice? The past year had been a flurry of wedding planning, with Cassandra controlling every detail. She'd asked me to be a bridesmaid rather than maid of honor, choosing her college roommate instead, which stung a little. But I went along with everything, helping with dress shopping and attending all the pre-wedding events with a smile plastered on my face. Meanwhile, things with James had been growing increasingly strained. He was working later and later, claiming big clients needed extra attention. Our once passionate relationship had cooled, with James often claiming he was too tired or stressed for intimacy. When he was home, he was constantly on his phone angling the screen away if I walked by. When I questioned him, he'd accuse me of not trusting him, making me feel guilty for having doubts. In the months leading up to Nathan's wedding, I noticed some odd interactions between James and Cassandra. At the engagement party, I found them in deep conversation that abruptly stopped when I approached. During the bridal shower, James showed up unexpectedly to pick me up, but spent most of the time chatting with Cassandra. Each time I told myself I was imagining things, that the stress of the wedding and my own marital problems were making me paranoid. Little did I know that my instincts were trying to warn me about what was to come. The rehearsal dinner was held at Sorellina, an upscale Italian restaurant in Back Bay. I arrived early, with James helping the restaurant staff arrange the place cards, according to Cassandra's precise instructions. Nathan looked happy but nervous, constantly adjusting his tie and checking his watch. Dad arrived looking distinguished as always in his tailored suit, greeting everyone with warm handshakes and gentle hugs. Cassandra was radiant in a white cocktail dress, playing the role of excited bride perfectly. Her parents had flown in from California, her father a tech executive with a booming laugh, and her mother a former model with the same striking features as her daughter. They dominated the conversation during cocktail hour, sharing stories of Cassandra's childhood achievements and making sure everyone knew about their Napa Valley vacation home. During dinner, I was seated between my father and one of Nathan's law school friends, with James across the table, unfortunately right next to Cassandra. I tried to focus on my conversation with Dad, who was telling me about a renovation he was considering for his house, but I couldn't help noticing James leaning toward Cassandra repeatedly. At one point, I saw them whispering behind the menu, their heads close together. When Cassandra's hand briefly touched James's under the table, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "You okay, sweetheart?" Dad asked, breaking my concentration. "You look like you're a million miles away." "I'm fine," I lied, taking a long sip of wine. "Just tired from all the wedding stuff." Dad nodded, but I noticed his eyes tracking James and Cassandra with an intensity that suggested he'd noticed something too. He had always been observant, a skill honed by years of watching people testify in his courtroom, looking for signs of deception or discomfort. After dinner, during the toasts, James excused himself to take a phone call. 5 minutes later, I noticed Cassandra was also missing. They both returned separately, Cassandra claiming she needed to discuss last-minute details with the wedding planner, and James saying his boss had an emergency. I felt sick to my stomach, but still tried to convince myself I was overreacting. The drive home was tense. I finally gathered the courage to confront James about what I'd observed. "What's going on with you and Cassandra?" I asked as we pulled into our driveway. James's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What are you talking about?" "The whispering, the secret glances. I saw her touch your hand under the table." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Are you serious right now?" She was showing me pictures of the honeymoon resort on her phone. "And if our hands touched, it was completely accidental." "You both disappeared at the same time after dinner," I pressed. "Jesus, Adriana," he snapped. "It's the night before your brother's wedding and you're creating drama out of nothing. This is so typical of you lately, always suspicious, always making accusations." "I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, it feels like an interrogation. I'm not doing this tonight." He got out of the car, slamming the door behind him. In bed that night, with James sleeping soundly beside me as if nothing was wrong, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I'd witnessed. Was I imagining things? Had years of watching my father look for lies in his courtroom made me overly suspicious? Or was something really happening between my husband and my brother's fiancé? The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, sunny, but not too hot for an outdoor ceremony. I joined the bridal party at the historic Lyman estate, where we were getting ready in the mansion's upstairs rooms. Cassandra seemed unusually solicitous toward me, complimenting my hair and asking if I needed anything repeatedly. It felt like overcompensation, which only increased my uneasiness. While the makeup artist worked on me, I texted James, who was supposed to be helping Nathan get ready in another part of the estate. His responses were delayed and terse. When I asked if everything was okay with Nathan, he just replied, "All good." Just before we were due to line up for the ceremony, Dad appeared at the bridal suite door asking to speak with me privately. We stepped into a quiet hallway, his expression serious. "Adriana, have you noticed anything unusual between James and Cassandra?" he asked without preamble. My heart sank. If Dad had noticed too, maybe I wasn't being paranoid after all. Still, I hesitated. "What do you mean?" Dad ran a hand through his silver hair. "Just some interactions that seem inappropriate. I might be wrong, but my gut is rarely off about these things." "I've had some concerns," I admitted. "But every time I try to talk to James about it, he makes me feel like I'm crazy for even suggesting it." Dad nodded slowly. "That's called gaslighting, sweetheart. I've seen it in my courtroom too many times." He glanced at his watch. "This isn't the time or place for this conversation. But keep your eyes open, and know that whatever happens, I'm here for you." He squeezed my shoulder and walked away, leaving me with a growing sense of dread on what should have been a purely joyful day. The ceremony took place in the estate's formal gardens with white chairs set up on the manicured lawn and an arch of roses where Nathan and Cassandra would exchange vows. As part of the bridal party, I walked down the aisle before Cassandra catching James's eye in the third row. He smiled at me, but it didn't reach his eyes. Watching Nathan standing at the altar, nervous but happy, I felt a surge of protectiveness. What if my suspicions were correct? What if Cassandra was betraying him before they even said "I do"? But then she appeared at the end of the aisle looking genuinely moved as she walked toward Nathan, and I tried to push my doubts away. Maybe I really was wrong about everything. The ceremony was beautiful with personal vows that brought tears to many eyes, including mine though, probably not for the reasons everyone assumed. As Nathan and Cassandra were pronounced husband and wife, I glanced at my father who was watching them with an unreadable expression. During the cocktail hour on the mansion's terrace, I mingled with guests while keeping an eye out for James. He'd disappeared almost immediately after the ceremony, claiming he needed to use the restroom. After 20 minutes without any sign of him, I started to worry. The photographer was trying to organize family photos, and we needed James for several of them. "Has anyone seen James?" I asked a group of cousins who shook their heads. "I think I saw him heading inside," one of my aunts offered. I made my way into the mansion, its historic rooms now set up for the reception with round tables and floral centerpieces. The place was mostly empty with guests still enjoying cocktails outside. I checked the men's restroom near the entrance, knocking and calling James's name, but got no response. Moving deeper into the house, I checked the library, the sitting room, and several other spaces without luck. As I walked down a long hallway lined with portraits of the estate's former owners, I heard voices coming from a small study off to the side. The door was slightly ajar, and I recognized James's voice immediately followed by a feminine laugh that I knew belonged to Cassandra. My heart pounding, I approached the door silently and pushed it open wider. What I saw froze me in place. James had Cassandra pressed against a bookshelf, his hands on her waist, their foreheads touching as they spoke in intimate whispers. As I watched in horror, he kissed her deeply. Not the kiss of a first-time encounter, but of practiced lovers who knew each other's rhythms well. "We shouldn't be doing this here," Cassandra was saying, though she made no move to push him away. "Someone could walk in?" "Everyone's outside," James replied, his hands now moving up her sides. "Besides, isn't the risk part of the thrill just like that time in Nathan's office?" "That was close," she giggled. "He almost caught us that day." "Worth it, though," James murmured, leaning in to kiss her neck. "God, I've been wanting to get you alone all day. You look so beautiful in that dress." "Just think soon we won't have to sneak around anymore," Cassandra said, running her hands through his hair. "Once everything falls into place." "I can't wait," James replied. "I'm so tired of pretending." I must have made a sound then because they both suddenly looked up, their expressions changing from desire to shock in an instant. They sprang apart, Cassandra immediately adjusting her wedding dress, James straightening his tie. Adriana, he exclaimed, this isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed at the cliché. Really? Because it looks exactly like you're having an affair with my brother's wife. His wife of 30 minutes. Cassandra stepped forward, tears already forming in her eyes. Adriana, please, you can't tell Nathan. It would destroy him. Destroy him, I repeated, my voice rising. You didn't seem concerned about that when you were just planning how you won't have to sneak around anymore. What does that even mean? James approached me, hands raised placatingly. Baby, let me explain. It just happened. We never meant to hurt anyone. Just happened, I was shouting now. You just said something about Nathan's office about not having to pretend anymore. This isn't some one-time mistake, this is an ongoing affair. Please lower your voice, Cassandra begged, glancing nervously at the door. The guests will hear. You should have thought about that before you decided to hook up at your own wedding. I turned to leave, unable to stand the sight of either of them for another second. Adriana, wait. James grabbed my arm, but I yanked it away. Don't touch me, I hissed. Don't ever touch me again. I stumbled into the hallway, my vision blurred by tears, and nearly collided with someone. Looking up, I found myself staring into my father's concerned face. From his expression, I knew immediately that he'd heard everything. Dad, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'm here, sweetheart, he said, pulling me against his chest as I finally broke down. Dad guided me into a small parlor across the hall, closing the door behind us. I collapsed onto a velvet settee, my entire body shaking with sobs. He sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders, waiting patiently for me to catch my breath. I saw them, I finally managed. James and Cassandra. They were kissing, talking about sneaking around, about not having to pretend anymore. Dad's expression darkened, but he didn't look surprised. I was afraid of this, he said quietly. You knew. I pulled back to look at him. I suspected, he corrected. I've been gathering evidence for weeks. I stared at him, not comprehending. Evidence? What do you mean? Dad sighed, looking suddenly older. About 3 weeks ago, I was having lunch downtown and saw them together at a restaurant. The way they were looking at each other, it wasn't appropriate for in-laws. They didn't see me and I left before they could. But it got me thinking about other interactions I'd observed. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Rather than make accusations without proof, I hired Martin. Your investigator friend, Dad, occasionally worked with a private investigator named Martin on complex cases. Dad nodded. He's been tracking their movements, gathering information. The affair has been going on for months, Adriana, since before Nathan even proposed. I felt like I'd been punched. Months, but that means when we were all at Christmas together, when we were planning the wedding. They were already involved, yes. Dad reached for his phone. I have photos, text message, transcripts, hotel receipts. I was planning to talk to you after the wedding once I had the full picture. I couldn't process what he was saying. Why didn't you tell me as soon as you suspected? I needed to be certain before I blew up both your marriage and your brother's relationship. And frankly, I was hoping I was wrong. He squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. The door opened then, and James slipped in his face a mask of contrition. Adriana, please, can we talk alone? Dad stood up, positioning himself between James and me. I don't think that's a good idea right now. James's expression hardened when he saw Dad. With all due respect, sir, this is between me and my wife. The time for respect was before you started sleeping with your sister-in-law, Dad replied, his voice cold but controlled. Whatever you have to say, you can say with me here. James ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Fine. Adriana, what you saw, it was a mistake. A terrible lapse in judgment. Cassandra and I got close during the wedding planning and things just escalated. But it didn't mean anything. I heard you, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I heard you talking about sneaking around for months, about meeting in Nathan's office, about not having to pretend anymore. You've been lying to my face while carrying on with her behind my back, behind Nathan's back. It's complicated, James insisted. I was going to end it, I swear. When? Dad interjected. After the honeymoon? After they bought a house together, after they had children. He pulled out his phone and showed James a photo. This was taken 2 days ago outside the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. Does this look like a relationship you were planning to end? James blanched at the photo. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting my children, Dad corrected. The door opened again and Cassandra entered her mascara smudge despite her obvious attempts to fix her makeup. The photographer is looking for all of us, she said, her voice trembling. People are starting to ask questions. Let them ask, I said, standing up. I'm sure they'd be very interested in what I just discovered. Adriana, please, Cassandra begged. It's my wedding day. Don't ruin it. You ruined it when you decided to sneak off with my husband in the middle of your reception, I shot back. We need to tell Nathan, Dad said firmly. No, Cassandra cried. It would destroy him. Please, can't we just get through today? We can figure this out later when everyone's gone. Figure what out exactly? I demanded. How you're going to keep cheating on my brother. How you two are planning to continue this betrayal. James stepped toward me. That's not what we want. I love you, Adriana. What happened with Cassandra was a mistake. A mistake that's been happening for months according to what I just heard, I retorted. We should go find Nathan, Dad said, moving toward the door. Wait, Cassandra blocked his path. You can't do this to him. Not now, not like this. Dad looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. My son deserves the truth. He deserves better than a marriage built on lies. Before Cassandra could respond, the door opened once more, and Nathan stood there, his eyes taking in the scene before him. What's going on? He asked, his gaze moving from my tear-stained face to Dad's grim expression, to James and Cassandra's obvious guilt. Everyone's wondering where the bride and groom disappeared to. The room fell silent, none of us knowing how to begin. It was Dad who finally spoke. Son, I think you should come in and close the door. There's something you need to know. Nathan stepped into the room, shutting the door behind him. His eyes immediately locked onto Cassandra's, sensing something was terribly wrong. What's going on? He repeated, his voice tense. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. How do you tell your brother on his wedding day that his new wife has been sleeping with your husband? Dad placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder. Son, this is going to be difficult to hear, but Adriana just discovered something very disturbing. Nathan looked at me, concern in his eyes. Audrey, what is it? I took a deep breath. I found James and Cassandra together just now. They were kissing, and from what I overheard, it wasn't the first time. Nathan's expression went from confusion to disbelief. What are you talking about? That's not possible. He turned to Cassandra. Tell her she's wrong. Tell her this is some kind of misunderstanding. Cassandra's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. She said nothing, which was answer enough. It's not what you think, man, James stepped in. It just happened, we didn't plan it. Nathan stared at him in shock. You're saying it's true. You and my wife. We never meant to hurt you. Cassandra finally spoke, her voice small. Nathan's face went white, then red with rage. My wife of less than an hour, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. My best friend's husband. The two people I trusted most in the world, besides my family. Nathan, please. Cassandra reached for him, but he jerked away as if her touch would burn him. How long? He demanded. How long has this been going on? Neither James nor Cassandra answered immediately, avoiding his gaze. How long? Nathan shouted, making us all jump. About a year, Cassandra whispered. The room went completely silent. A year. That meant they'd been having an affair before Nathan even proposed. A year, Nathan repeated as if testing the words. So when I was shopping for your engagement ring, you were sleeping with my sister's husband. When we were planning our wedding, picking out china patterns and wedding songs, you were sneaking around behind my back. I'm so sorry, Cassandra sobbed. I do love you, Nathan. It's complicated. Complicated? Nathan laughed, a hollow sound. No calculus is complicated. What you did is very simple. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. He turned to James, who had the decency to look ashamed. And you. I welcomed you into our family. I stood up as your best man when you married my sister. And this is how you repay that. I made a mistake, James said. A terrible mistake. A year-long mistake, I interjected, unable to stay silent. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. A choice you made every single day. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, his breathing ragged. I can't believe this is happening. There are 200 people out there waiting for us to cut the cake, take photos, have our first dance. There's something else, Cassandra said quietly, looking at the floor. Something you all need to know. We all turned to her, watching as she placed a protective hand over her stomach. My blood ran cold, immediately understanding what she was about to say. I'm pregnant, she whispered. Nathan staggered backward as if he'd been struck. You're what? I'm about 10 weeks along, she continued, tears falling freely now. And I don't know who the father is. It could be you or James. Nathan lunged forward suddenly, heading straight for James, his hands balled into fists. Dad quickly stepped between them, but not to stop Nathan as I expected. Instead, he put a restraining hand on Nathan's chest while reaching into his jacket with the other hand. Before anyone does anything they might regret, Dad said calmly. There's something you should all see. He pulled out a thick manila envelope from his inner jacket pocket. I've been suspicious for some time. The way they looked at each other, the excuses to be alone, the secretive phone checking. I didn't want to believe it, but my instincts were too strong to ignore. Dad opened the envelope, spreading its contents on a nearby table. There were dozens of photographs, printed text message, conversations, hotel receipts, and what looked like credit card statements. This is them entering the Park Plaza Hotel on March 15th, Dad explained, showing a clear photo of James and Cassandra checking in at the front desk. This is them at a restaurant in Cambridge on April 22nd, when James told you he was at a client dinner. Adriana and Cassandra told you she was having drinks with colleagues Nathan. He laid out more evidence methodically and precisely, like he was presenting evidence to a jury. There were text messages between them, arranging meetings using code words that were now obvious in context. Credit card statements showing jewelry purchases that I'd never received. A reservation for a weekend getaway scheduled for next month when James had told me he had a conference. I hired Martin 3 weeks ago when I first suspected something, Dad explained. He's very thorough. This isn't everything, but it's enough. We all stared at the evidence in stunned silence. James and Cassandra looked trapped, all their denials and explanations useless in the face of such comprehensive proof. You've been planning this, I said, looking at Dad in amazement. You knew this was happening and you were building a case. Dad nodded grimly. I'm a judge, sweetheart. I deal in evidence, not accusations. And once I had enough evidence, I contacted my lawyer. He reached back into his jacket and pulled out another envelope. I've had these prepared for the past week, waiting to see if my suspicions would be confirmed. He extracted 2 sets of documents, handing one to me and one to Nathan. I looked down at the papers in my hand, my eyes widening as I realized what I was holding. Divorce papers already filled out with all the relevant information, needing only my signature. You prepared divorce papers for both of us? Nathan asked, sounding as shocked as I felt. I hoped I wouldn't need them, Dad replied. But I wanted to be prepared. You'll notice there's a morality clause referenced there, which is especially relevant given that all 4 of you work for firms with strict ethical guidelines. He turned to James and Cassandra, his expression hard. I've documented everything. If either of you tries to contest these divorces or attempts to secure any financial benefit from my children, this evidence goes directly to your employers as well as becomes public record in the divorce proceedings. James swallowed hard. You're blackmailing us. I'm protecting my children, Dad corrected. There's a difference. I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing quietly and with some small measure of dignity, which is more than you deserve. Cassandra was staring at the photos, her face ashen. You've been watching us all this time. Not me personally, Dad said. But yes, your activities have been documented. including your conversation earlier about how soon you won't have to sneak around anymore and how tired of pretending you are. Care to explain what exactly that meant? James and Cassandra exchanged a look, and I felt a fresh wave of anger. Even now, they were communicating silently, sharing something that excluded Nathan and me. We were going to end things properly, James said finally, after a suitable time had passed. Suitable for whom? Nathan demanded. For the woman carrying a child who might not be mine. For my sister who you've been lying to for a year. We never meant for any of this to happen, Cassandra insisted. We tried to fight our feelings, but— Spare us, I interrupted. If you had any real remorse, you wouldn't have gone through with this wedding. What happens now? James asked, looking at the divorce papers. Dad adjusted his cufflinks, the gesture oddly calm amid the chaos. Now we have some decisions to make. There are 200 guests out there expecting a celebration. We can either create a very public scandal right now, or we can proceed with the reception and deal with this privately afterward. You expect us to go out there and pretend everything is fine? I asked incredulously. No, Dad replied. I expect us to make the best of an impossible situation. The choice is yours and Nathan's. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Nathan stared at the divorce papers in his hand, then at his new wife, the woman he'd pledged his life to less than an hour ago. I want everyone to know the truth, he said finally. I won't pretend that my marriage isn't already over. Nathan, please, Cassandra begged. Think about the baby. The baby that might not even be mine. Nathan's voice broke. The baby that might be my brother-in-law's. How exactly would you like me to think about that? A scene won't help anyone right now, Dad said gently. If you want to announce something, we can do it together calmly. But maybe there's a middle ground. The reception is almost over. Most people are starting to leave. We could simply say you're both feeling unwell and are retiring early. And then what? I asked. We just let them go back to their hotel room together. Let them continue their affair while we sort out the mess they've made. Dad looked at James and Cassandra coldly. No, they won't be staying together tonight. In fact, I've taken the liberty of canceling their honeymoon reservations. You what? Cassandra gasped. I called the resort this morning and canceled in Nathan's name, Dad said matter-of-factly. Full refund, fortunately. I didn't know for certain what would happen today, but I wanted to be prepared for all possibilities. I stared at my father in amazement. The level of forethought, the careful planning, all while maintaining his composure. It was both impressive and a little frightening. I suggest we return to the reception separately, Dad continued. Nathan and I will go first. Adriana, you follow in a few minutes. James and Cassandra, you will come out last, and you will both behave appropriately for the remainder of the evening. And then, James asked, and then you both pack your things and get out. Nathan said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. I want you out of our lives by tomorrow. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur. Dad and Nathan returned to the party first, with Nathan managing to force a smile for the guests, though anyone who knew him well could tell something was wrong. I followed a few minutes later, my makeup hastily fixed, avoiding questions about where I'd been by claiming I had needed to lie down due to a migraine. James and Cassandra reappeared last their entrance, causing a stir as guests called for the first dance. I watched from the sidelines as they moved awkwardly around the dance floor, maintaining a respectable distance from each other, both of their smiles strained. The irony wasn't lost on me that their wedding song was At Last by Etta James. Dad stayed close to my side, his presence comforting. Occasionally he would squeeze my hand or place a protective arm around my shoulders silently, letting me know I wasn't alone. Nathan joined us after fulfilling his minimal duties as groom, his face a mask of controlled anger. I just want this day to be over, he whispered to me as we watched Cassandra cut the cake with her father James nowhere in sight. I know, I replied, linking my arm through his. I still can't believe this is happening. Neither can I, Nathan said, but at least we know the truth now. He glanced at Dad. Thanks to some impressive detective work. Dad gave a small shrug. I wish I had been wrong. As the reception wound down, Guests began to leave, many commenting on how lovely the wedding had been, completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded behind closed doors. James had positioned himself by the exit, shaking hands and accepting congratulations meant for Nathan, who had retreated to a corner with Dad and me. Cassandra approached our little group, her eyes red but her makeup intact. "My parents are asking why we're not leaving for the hotel together," she said quietly. "What should I tell them?" "Tell them whatever you want," Nathan replied coldly. "Your talent for lying should come in handy." "Nathan, please," she begged. "Can we talk privately? Just for a minute?" Nathan looked at Dad and me. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of my family. They're the only people I trust right now." Cassandra wiped away a tear. "I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to. But I need you to know that I do love you. What happened with James, it was a mistake that spiraled out of control." "Save it," Nathan said. "I'm not interested in your excuses or explanations. The only thing we need to discuss is practical arrangements. I'll be filing for an annulment first thing Monday morning." "Annulment?" Cassandra looked shocked. "But we've been together for 2 years. You can't just erase that." "Watch me," Nathan said. "And regarding the pregnancy, I'll be requiring a paternity test as soon as medically advisable." "Of course," Cassandra whispered. "And if it's yours?" "Then we'll work out custody and support," Nathan said. "But nothing else. Our relationship is over, Cassandra." As they continued this painful conversation, I noticed James approaching. My entire body tensed. "Adriana," he said softly, "can I speak with you alone?" "No," I replied firmly. "You've lost the privilege of private conversations with me." James looked at Dad, clearly intimidated by his presence, but pressing on anyway. "What happens now?" With our home, you'll be hearing from my lawyer," I said, surprised at how calm I sounded. "Until then, I suggest you find somewhere else to stay." "You're kicking me out of our house." James looked genuinely shocked, as if he hadn't expected consequences for his actions. "It's my house," I reminded him. "My name is on the deed, not yours. You insisted on that arrangement when we bought it. Remember, something about your credit score." James's face fell as he realized the implications. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not our concern," Dad interjected. "You've made your choices, now you can deal with the results." "I made a mistake," James insisted, his voice rising slightly. "People make mistakes, Adriana. We can work through this." "A year-long affair isn't a mistake," I replied. "It's a deliberate betrayal carried out day after day, lie after lie. And from what I heard earlier, you had no intention of ending it." "That's not true," James protested, but his eyes shifted away, unable to meet mine. "I heard you say you were tired of pretending," I reminded him. "What exactly did that mean, James? Were you planning to leave me for Cassandra after she got pregnant? Were you going to run off together once you'd squeezed what you could from Nathan and me?" James didn't answer, his silence damning. "That's what I thought," I said. "I want your things out of my house by tomorrow night. If you're not gone by then, everything you own goes on the front lawn." The last few guests were leaving, calling out their final congratulations. As soon as the room was empty except for our small group and the venue staff beginning to clean up, Dad cleared his throat. "I think it's time we all left as well," he said. "Nathan, you're coming home with me tonight. Adriana, would you like to join us?" I nodded gratefully. The thought of returning to the home I'd shared with James was unbearable right now. "What about us?" Cassandra asked, her voice small. "The honeymoon suite is canceled," Dad finished for her. "As I mentioned earlier, I took the liberty of canceling your reservation when I suspected what might happen today. I suggest you both find separate accommodations." "You can't do that," Cassandra protested weakly. "It's our wedding night." "A wedding based on lies isn't much of a wedding at all," Dad replied evenly. "And if you're concerned about appearances, I'm sure you can come up with an appropriate story. You've both become quite adept at deception." With those parting words, Dad guided Nathan and me toward the exit, leaving James and Cassandra standing amid the wreckage of what should have been the happiest day of their lives. As we walked out into the cool evening air, I felt a strange mixture of devastation and relief. My marriage was over. My brother's wedding day had ended in disaster, but at least the truth was finally out. And most importantly, we weren't facing it alone. "Dad," I said as we reached his car, "how did you stay so calm through all of this? How did you know exactly what to do?" Dad opened the car door for me, a sad smile on his face. 25 years as a judge sweetheart. I've seen the worst of human behavior, and I've learned that preparation and evidence are more powerful than emotional outbursts. And when it comes to protecting my children, there's nothing I wouldn't do. As we drove away from the venue, leaving behind the elaborate flower arrangements and uneaten wedding cake, I realized just how lucky Nathan and I were to have a father who had our backs, even when our own spouses didn't. The days and weeks following Nathan's wedding were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional conversations, and practical arrangements. Dad's preparation proved invaluable as both Nathan and I navigated the end of our relationships. As promised, James moved his things out of our house, though not without attempting to take items that weren't his. I came home one afternoon to find him trying to remove artwork that I had purchased before we even met. When I confronted him, he claimed they were joint property but backed down when I mentioned involving Dad and his private investigator. Nathan's situation was more complicated due to Cassandra's pregnancy. A paternity test performed at 12 weeks confirmed what we had all feared: James was the biological father. The news devastated Nathan all over again, but also provided a clean break. The annulment proceeded quickly, with Cassandra not contesting anything after Dad reminded her of the evidence he possessed. James initially tried to fight our divorce, claiming temporary insanity and begging for another chance. His tune changed when Dad revealed that among his evidence were records of money James had been siphoning from our joint account into a private one, something I hadn't even known about. Faced with potential criminal charges for financial fraud, on top of everything else, James agreed to Dad's terms, a quick, quiet divorce with no claims on my assets. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment in Cambridge, surrounded by moving boxes. After selling the house, which held too many painful memories, I had decided on a fresh start. The space was smaller but filled with light, with large windows overlooking a tree-lined street. I had taken only what was truly mine, leaving behind the furniture James and I had picked together, the wedding photos, anything that reminded me of our life together. Nathan had made similar changes, taking a temporary assignment in his firm's Washington, D.C. office to get some distance from Boston and all its reminders of Cassandra. We spoke almost daily, supporting each other through our parallel journeys of heartbreak and recovery. As for James and Cassandra, they had apparently moved to Chicago together shortly after both divorces were finalized. According to mutual friends who couldn't resist sharing gossip, they had welcomed a baby girl 2 months ago. I wished I could say the news didn't hurt, but even after everything, there was a sting in knowing they had built a life together from the ruins of mine and Nathan's. Dad had been my rock throughout the entire ordeal. He had connected me with an excellent therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, joined me for dinners when being alone felt too heavy, and never once said, "I told you so," even though his instincts about James had been right from the beginning. Today, Dad and Nathan were coming over to help me unpack and officially christen my new place with a family dinner. I had been cooking all morning, recreating Mom's famous lasagna recipe that had been a Sunday tradition before her death. The doorbell rang just as I was setting the table. I opened it to find Dad and Nathan both carrying housewarming gifts. "Something smells amazing," Nathan said, giving me a one-armed hug while balancing a plant in the other hand. "Mom's lasagna," I confirmed, taking the plant from him, "along with garlic bread and that Caesar salad you like." "You've been busy," Dad commented, looking around at the half-unpacked apartment. "The place is looking good." We settled into a rhythm, Dad unpacking kitchen boxes, while Nathan hung pictures and I finished preparing dinner. It felt comfortable and right, the three of us working together, occasionally sharing memories or laughing at some quirky item I'd forgotten I owned. During dinner, Nathan shared news about his job in D.C. and tentatively mentioned a new friendship with a colleague that might be developing into something more. "It's very early days," he cautioned, "and I'm still not sure I'm ready." But she's smart and funny and completely unconnected to my life here, which is refreshing.
Give her arm.
Take your time, Dad advised. There's no rush to jump into anything new. What about you, Audrey? Nathan asked. Any potential suitors knocking at your door? I laughed, shaking my head. Not even close to being ready for that. I'm enjoying rediscovering who I am without James. My therapist says that's important before involving someone new. Your therapist is right, Dad said. And I'm proud of both of you for how you've handled everything. Not everyone would have shown the same resilience. We had a good example, I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. You know, I've been thinking a lot about how you handled everything that day. You were so prepared, so controlled. Dad set down his fork. Perhaps too controlled. I've wondered if I should have told you both my suspicions earlier. No, Nathan shook his head. You did the right thing. You needed evidence before dropping that kind of bomb on us. And honestly, I'm not sure I would have believed it without seeing it for myself. I've always been curious, I said. Those divorce papers, had you really prepared them before the wedding, or was that a bluff to intimidate them? Dad smiled slightly. No bluff. I had them drawn up the week before. My friend Helen in family court expedited them as a personal favor. And the canceled honeymoon? Nathan asked. Also true, Dad confirmed. I called the resort in Bali that morning just in case. The manager was very understanding when I explained it was a family emergency. You're kind of terrifying, you know that. I laughed. Remind me never to cross you. Not terrifying, Dad corrected. Just protective. There's a difference. As we finished dinner and moved to the small living area with glasses of wine, I felt a wave of gratitude despite everything that had happened. The betrayal had been devastating, and it had also shown me who truly had my back. I've been thinking about what Mom would say about all this, Nathan said, suddenly looking into his wine glass. She always had a sixth sense about people. She would have seen through both of them immediately, Dad agreed, and she would be so proud of how you've both handled yourselves. I think what surprised me most, I reflected, was how calm you were, Dad. When I found them together, I was ready to scream to make a scene. But you were so measured, so strategic. Dad was quiet for a moment. When your mother was diagnosed, I fell apart at first. I was angry at the universe, at the doctors, at myself for not noticing the symptoms sooner. But anger didn't help her, and it didn't help you two. I learned that the hard way. He took a sip of his wine before continuing. What helped was taking action, making plans, finding the best doctors, researching treatments. It gave me a sense of control in an uncontrollable situation. I couldn't save your mother, but I could make her remaining time easier. With James and Cassandra, I couldn't prevent their betrayal, but I could protect you both from the fallout. Well, it worked, Nathan said. Thanks to you, they got nothing from either of us except what they deserved. And we got each other, I added. A stronger family. We raised our glasses in a toast to survival, to fresh starts, and to the unexpected strength that can emerge from betrayal. As I looked around at my new home, at my brother and father, who had stood by me through the darkest time of my life, I realized that despite everything, I was going to be okay. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, and trust wouldn't come easily next time, but I was healing, and that was enough for now. So what does everyone think about starting a new Sunday dinner tradition? I asked. Maybe not every week, but regularly, especially when Nathan is in town. I'd like that, Dad said, his eyes twinkling. Your mother would approve. To new traditions, then, Nathan said, raising his glass again. And to unexpected lessons, I added. Sometimes the most painful discoveries lead to necessary endings, and those endings make way for better beginnings. As we continued talking into the night, sharing memories and making plans, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. James and Cassandra had taken much from us, but they hadn't taken everything. The three of us sitting in my new apartment building, something new from the ashes of betrayal, was proof of that. Have you ever had someone betray your trust in a shocking way? How did you rebuild afterward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it meaningful and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal and the unexpected ways we find strength. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our greatest growth comes after our deepest pain.